This is from Eric Hoffer, who wrote the book, The True Believer. We can only be absolutely certain about things we don't understand. I also like to mention when we have our welcoming words, a lot of people forget. I always like to add another phrase at the end because we welcome all these people, but we forget. And I always like to say, no matter if you are from Texas, you are welcome here. People forget to say that. Okay. What do you believe?
Steve, did you want special music?
Oh, yeah. Is there special music? Yeah.
We have special music, and then we have, we'll have.
Oh God, we got all kinds of stuff to do.
Could
Very
you give
good.
us those censoring words again, please?
Okay, the censoring words once more. We can be absolutely certain only about things we don't understand.
Come Sunday, oh, come Sunday, that's the day. Lord, dear Lord above, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through. I believe that God put sun and moon up in the sky. I don't mind the gray skies, 'cause they're just clouds passing by. Lord, dear Lord above, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through. I believe God is now, was then, and always will be. With God's blessing, we can make it through eternity. Lord, dear Lord above, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through.
Thank you so much, Joanna. This community of care is created through our work and our time together, our commitment to one another. This is our covenant to walk together in loving fellowship, to share our hopes and values. As we pass these baskets, we thank you for your generous gifts, which support the work of this religious community and Unitarian Universalism in the world at large. As a reflection of our values, We're pleased to participate in the Change for Change program. The coins you place in the basket today will support the work of nonprofits in and around the Grand Valley. And we will now receive today's offering. This congregation is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to its life, we affirm our lives within it.
You are singing, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
Our hymn is number 112, Do You Hear, in the gray hymnal.
In the heights
I'm glad Joanna stopped me before I started, because I would have had to get halfway through my sermon and say stop, and then I'd have to repeat the whole thing. You know? Okay. Hey, in February in the paper, there was a story of the father, mother, and daughter who killed themselves because the US would become a disaster without Trump. When Trump wasn't, I guess they kept thinking he was going to be reelected. And you start thinking about people and their beliefs. And you go, wow, what kind of fear? You know, the mother shot the father, then they had the daughter shoot the mother, and then she committed suicide. I don't know if you know, it was in the paper. I was going, but you can imagine the amount of fear that filled them, what they were afraid of, to have to take their own lives. That's the kind of thing we're dealing with on beliefs. And a man in a letter to the editor I remember reading, he said, I would die for Trump. And I thought to myself, be my guest, you know. But these decisions are not rational, they're emotional. They're based on faith or a belief, something you believe is going to happen, some fear of something that's going to happen. You know, we've heard of martyrs, people dying for their faith. People die for their country. We hear about all the people that died in the wars, believing in their country. People die for their friends. We hear about soldiers who take their own life rather than save the life of their buddy. Famous movie, Man for All Seasons, Sir Thomas More, who was under Henry VIII and wouldn't reconcile himself with Henry VIII, you know, separating from Rome and saying, I'm the head of the church. And Henry just said, if you can just kind of go along. And, you know, if I was Thomas More, I would have just crossed my fingers and said whatever, you know. But you think he actually, you know, was killed. He was considered a martyr now. And you think, over what? What was he defending? The Catholic Church or something, I guess. But it makes you ask yourself, what do you believe? And I'll give you some points here. Teachers. Do you believe teachers are inculcating kids with their own agenda and trying to groom them or make them biased or hate the country or something? You hear this in the right. How about government? Is government here to help? Or is the government the problem? Like Ronald Reagan, when he said, if the government says, I'm here to help, then, you know, be afraid. And it's one thing for a stand-up comedian to say that, but for a president to say that, people start to take it seriously. And yet the government, think of what, you know, they've helped with. The internet was part of a government project. A lot of the drugs from National Institute of Health, the roads, our airports, you know, people forget about all that. The media, do you think the media is just run by a bunch of liberals? You know, most reporters would probably have college educations and they're trying to be critical thinkers. That's what reporters do. So of course you're going to be a liberal, you know. And then gay, how about guns? What do you think about guns? You know, it used to be when people, I have guns, I use them, I use a shotgun for trap shooting and sporting clays. But when people used to go buy a gun, they say, what do you know, they'd say, I'm buying it for either sporting, or for hunting. Now, a lot of times when people go into a store to buy a gun, what are they saying? Self-protection. They really, that's fear. You think I have to have a gun to protect myself? Whatever. How about experts? What do you think of the people that are knowledgeable? Do you think that's all groupthink? Do you believe Dr. Fauci, or do you believe somebody that's on the radio who you've never heard of before, who has no credentials and no oversight over what he says? Global warming. You know, I think some of the problem with global warming is they overstated it, and people, it wasn't plausible. So, you know, the end of the world-ish kind of thing that people had a hard time believing it, so they didn't take it seriously. And when you're trying to say something, you can't oversell it. And then your fellow man. I read a long article about why conservatives are more prone to conspiracy theories than liberals. And this Baptist minister said, and this is not any kind of scientific survey or anything. He said, I think liberals basically think people are good, and conservatives basically think people are bad. And if you think about it, I don't know how scientific that answer is, but you know, the conservatives think there's a deep state in the government. Do you think there's a deep state? But if you think that people are basically bad, then you think, boy, I got to be careful. I got to watch out because people are trying to take advantage of me. We have to remember that what you believe also speaks to what you want to believe, what you want to be true. Like if you really wanted Trump to win the election and they say it was stolen, does that seem plausible or not? Well, if you really wanted him to be president, that sounds fairly believable that it was stolen. Whereas the people who didn't like him, that doesn't sound believable at all. So a lot of things about what we believe has to do with what we want to believe. You know, cults are a belief in a person. And remember James Jones, he took all the people down to Guyana. That was the Kool-Aid thing. You keep hearing that over, now it's a cliche. They drank the Kool-Aid. But James Jones, he was going to wipe out racism. That was his plan. That's what he told the people. But when you look at those photos of the people in Guyana, they were all Black who had taken the Kool-Aid. And he was going to wipe out racism. But these are all the Black people that went down there with him. What about E. Ron Hubbard and Scientology? You know, what they believe. And the thing about cults, if you people, you hear all these things about movies, if you leave the cult, then people go after you. They deride you, they criticize you, they try to take any credibility you might have and say you're just full of baloney. And that's kind of true of the cult around Trump. People are afraid now. They left the cult and they're afraid Trump will criticize them. Look at all the Republicans running who their number one problem of speaking out is they're afraid of Trump's criticism. That's all about what cults are. If you leave, you're going to pay the price. We get the same story from evangelical Christians, you know. Whites, let me just say something about whites. There's a whole thing about Trump is a cult, as a core, symbolized something for white people who thought they weren't given their proper respect. And I've got just a passage out of here, a short passage from David Brooks' editorial, and it basically says, the white working class once sat comfortably at the core of the American idea. But now its members have seen their skills devalued, their neighborhoods transformed. My cousin 30 years ago was saying in LA, he lives in Los Angeles, he said, I'm a minority in my city. That was 30 years ago. So their neighborhoods are transformed, their masculinity delegitimized, their family structures decimated, dignity erased, their basic decency questioned. They commonly feel invisible, alienated, and culturally pessimistic. So they become, you see, complainers. They complain about America, that things aren't the way they used to be. And Christians do the same thing too. They've gotten into the same thing. We're fading. Everybody hates Christians. They're trying to do away with Christianity. They don't have prayers in the school. And you take on this victim thing that Trump says, I'm going to jail, so you guys better rally. The thing about taking on the victim story, is that people circle the wagons. Like, you know, the old cliche about circling the wagons, that's from when the Wild West, when the Indians were attacking you, you circled the wagons. And it made you stronger because the fear that you were being attacked, that fear made you group together and feel united in your Christianity, whatever, because we're being attacked. Just like, remember after 9/11 and everybody was driving around with flags flying out of their cars and stuff. God, I never saw so many American flags in my life after that, because it makes you, if you feel you're being attacked, it makes you, that fear makes you group together to gain strength with each other. And so you become more defensive. And the Atlantic magazine had an article about the US being divided into 4 categories. There's the libertarian, and these aren't exact, you know, people go in and out of these, but just for argument's sake, don't tread on me. Less government is better. Ignoring what the government has done. Just saying, we don't want government in our lives. Okay, there's that factor. The college educated, the knowledge economy, government does have on a roll, and they kind of look down on the less educated, thinking the problem with these people is they don't understand. The small town patriot. I built America and I'm being taken advantage of. Nobody respects me anymore. Like the people that live in Colburn, you know. When Trump was running the first time, I drove up through Colburn, Trump signs were all over the place. And I started thinking, you know, if you live in a rural area, you want things to stay the same, all you probably see are other white people, you know, because these people hate city living. You know, I hate city living. But city living exposes you to all different kinds of races and people. And, well, you know, the homeless as well as the wealthy getting out of their limousines. I mean, you see all kinds. But it has a fear in itself of any change in of people moving. And then the new generation. This is a group of people that see America as unjust. The 1% with all the money. Remember the people on Wall Street who did the stand-in on Wall Street. But what the point of this is think of the different beliefs and what they're going to tend to believe or not believe if they hear it in the paper. If you come from one of these four basic groups, what do you tend to believe or not believe? Especially if their belief is the truth. If you believe, like I'm saying, you know, it's the truth. The only thing we can be certain of is things we don't understand. Because if you really understand something, you realize how complex anything is. And it starts to make you wonder, what is the truth? But if you don't worry about that kind of thing, the complexity of an issue, then you can be very sure of yourselves. And the talk about the way, they remember the way we used to be. And I remember reading the paper about this county clerk in Mississippi. And she was very worried about all the Blacks who are registering to vote. This was something she hadn't seen before, all these. And you have to understand the fear she felt. Like if I just said, hey, Trump has been reelected as our next president, feel how that feels. That's how she felt. My God, what's going to happen in Mississippi? What's going to happen in my county? All these Blacks are, that's fear. That makes you circle the wagons, right? And most of our racism is unconscious. We are the default race in the United States. In other words, most of us are white. 2010, about 70% of the US was a Caucasian white. In 2020 census, about 60%. We went from 70 to 60. So you can see why people are concerned. I'm talking about the white people. We have to try to understand these people because these are beliefs. And I don't see anything changing that, actually. I think it's even going to go lower. Look at the school district here, how they had to shut, they're closing schools down. This is an 80% white community, and we're not filling our schools. People are staying single. The 24 to 35 age group is a lot of single people now. And a lot of married people are not having children who are white. That's not so much true of the minorities. Let me get back to where I am here. And so racism is unconscious. Here's the thing. If you're not white in the United States, you're different. And if you're different, you're not normal, right? But if you go to Africa, then you're different. If you go to Asia, you're different. If you go to a gay bar, normally you're the one who's different. So you're the one who's not normal in those countries. But if you don't travel, if you don't get around, if you don't expose yourself to other cultures, you're not as tolerant of that. And a person wrote a book called Dying of Whiteness. And he uses three examples: gun ownership, refusal to enroll in the Affordable Care Act. You know, a lot of states never enrolled in that. And basically what it is an expansion of Medicaid for the poor. And then no tax on small business in Kansas. And the gun has always been kind of a symbol of white power. And Bushmaster, who made the guns used at the Sandy Hook massacre, They had a campaign saying, get your man card. How do you get your man card? You buy a gun. You buy a Bushmaster. Because guns are a symbol of power. And look at the militias who gather at these meetings with their guns. They're exercising power. They're trying to say, hey, things aren't going to change around here. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a gun in the house, it's 7 times more likely it's going to be used against a family member than an intruder. Ask yourself, how many times have you had to shoot an intruder? 0 for me. Maybe 0 for you too. But it's the fear, it's the thinking, I need to have this, I need to have it in case somebody, but having that gun around, a lot of them are used for suicide. And you hear all about, like, how about the 6-year-old that took the gun to school and shot his classmate? You know, this kind of thing. And then the Affordable Care Act. I'm going to read you a passage from Dying of Whiteness. It's a couple paragraphs. Here's the book, Dying of Whiteness. This guy had hepatitis C. And it says, as it turned out, debates raged in Tennessee around the same time about the state's participation in the Affordable Care Act. This was Tennessee. And the related expansion of Medicaid. Had Trevor, he's the guy with hepatitis, had simply lived 39-minute drive to the neighboring Kentucky, he may have topped the list of candidates for expensive medications called polymerase inhibitors, a life-saving liver transplant, or other forms of treatment and support. Kentucky adopted the ACA, Affordable Care Act, and began the expansion in 2013 while Tennessee's legislature repeatedly blocked Obama-era healthcare reforms. Okay, even on death's doorstep, Trevor wasn't angry. In fact, he staunchly supported the stance promoted by his elected officials. Ain't no way I would ever support Obamacare or sign up for it, he told me. I would rather die. When I asked him why he felt this way, even as he faced severe illness, he explained, we don't need any more government in our lives. And in any case, no way I want my tax dollars paying for Mexicans or welfare queens. You know, it reminds me of a phrase, you know, life is hard, but it's really hard if you're stupid, you know. And when people, you know, this is a belief system. This is something the guy believes. This isn't based on any kind of facts. Come on. You know, I just saw where South Carolina adopted the Affordable Care Act, and I thought that's interesting. But one thing I thought that probably influenced that decision is Obama's not in office anymore. If you took Obamacare into your state while he was in office, you're basically saying, hey, this Black president is right. He's doing good things. I just something like that crossed my mind. And in Kansas, he talks about they had huge tax cuts, like Governor Brown, to encourage small businesses. And I remember they interviewed one guy and they said, well, what did you do with the tax cut for your business? Well, he said, I didn't need any extra employees. I was selling all I could. And I had all the markets. And he said, I didn't need the money. So I just took the family to Mexico. So he spent his money, his tax in Mexico. Meanwhile, the Kansas state school system really started to suffer, and that affects whites because Kansas is basically a white state. It affected everybody. In another book I read, Confederates in the Attic. And it was these are the people that reenact the Civil War. And, you know, probably you and I don't think about the Civil War much at all. Civil War is something that happened in history over 150 years ago. But in the South, these people, it's very alive, very much alive. They don't let it go away. And these reenactments, and they still feel that the Union, the Yankees punished them and they were treated poorly. Again, the victim thing. We got to circle the wagons because the North is mistreating us. And they were the South. Think of this: the South, when they did away with slavery, they lost 1/3 of their net worth 1/3 of the net worth of the South was tied up in slaves. Now, a lot of people didn't own slaves, but the people that did own slaves, that was a lot of money that just went right down the drain. So they reenact the Civil War battles. They go barefoot. If the Rebs were barefoot, they try to do it exactly the way they did. If they didn't eat for 2 days, they don't eat for 2 days. But the Civil War is very much alive with these people. And they had these feelings that they kept in private about resentment of the government in the North. And I think Trump said, bring those feelings out. Don't hide them. You know, these beliefs that you have that you're being persecuted by the North and the Yankees, let it happen. And I started thinking as I read this book, I suddenly started to understand how Trump could win. People had all these feelings that they just kind of didn't talk about much or didn't let come out. And suddenly here was their opportunity. There's a little saying on belief. It says, belief has answers. Science has questions. Belief gives you something to hang on to, something you can be sure about. It gives you security, comfort. It's like an anchor. It brings security, whereas science might leave you confused. Like, what's going on here? There's so many different ways of looking at this issue. There's always in science contradictory indications. And a lot of science is based on probability. How often do you hear them come out and say, this is absolute truth? Doesn't happen very much. This is probable. This is 95% probable, 90% probable. But science is not afraid of challenges like faith is. If science is challenged, they try to rethink their process or redo the experiment or take a different approach. It's a way of growing their knowledge. If faith is attacked, and this is some of your most profound needs, then you are willing to protect your belief. Belief is fragile. Belief has to be reaffirmed all the time. If you're a real arch-right conservative, you need to Rush Limbaugh every day. You need to keep enhancing that, reaffirming it, because things go away. You can see right now that Trump now is starting, people are losing their faith in Trump because they're seeing different things in him. It's not like somebody talked them out of believing in Trump. It's just that belief in him is starting to fade because of facts. They just start to creep in and creep in. And if you don't keep reinforcing your faith in Trump, then it might start to fade away on you. And, you know, we have in religion, this is common. You know, we have practicing Catholics. You have to fallen away Catholics. Why were a lot of people, the church, like the Spanish Inquisition, when they burned somebody, that was in the Inquisition called that an auto de fe. That's Spanish for an act of faith. An act of faith when they're burning somebody. Why would you burn somebody? So he doesn't take his thinking and influence other Catholics to lose their faith. We don't want other people affecting us, causing us to lose our faith, attacking our faith, weakening our faith because it is vulnerable. The Catholic Church had a codex of books you weren't allowed to read unless you got permission of the bishop, because if you read this book, it might weaken your faith. Belief is fragile. So you have to keep talking to like-minded people or whatever to keep reinforcing your faith. You have to keep reading. If you're religious, you have to keep reading books. You have to keep doing things. While the tenets of science are challenged, not a problem. Questions are welcome because they lead to progress. The Ukrainians, the Unitarians, I got Ukraine on my mind. Okay. We don't really have a belief system. I mean, the start of the, J.B. Priestley started, you know, he's one of the starters of the Unitarian religion. He had his house burned down. He finally ended up moving to the United States. He was a scientist. He discovered oxygen. I remember once telling somebody he invented oxygen. And the guy said, well, thank God for that. No, he discovered oxygen. But he used to have coffee with Ben Franklin when he was our ambassador to England, but he finally ended up moving to the United States. But basically it was kind of that there's only one God. There's not a Trinity, okay? You can say that's a belief. We don't, Unitarians, I remember somebody said, I said, I'm a Unitarian. He said, is that a religion? I said, I don't know. But if you want to believe there's a Trinity, nobody's going to beat you up. You know what I mean? If somebody came in and said, I believe in the Trinity, I said, hey, fine with me, because we don't have a belief system. That means we have to torture people or put them to death. We see the Muslims had a real problem with that. They said the problem with the Muslim faith is it never went through an enlightenment like we did in the 1700s. And so you still see all these people that the Muslims are killing because they make fun. They have a cartoon they write and make fun of, Allah or something like that. That's how sensitive they are. That's how threatened they feel that they have to kill somebody. You don't have to, the Unitarians, we don't have to kill anybody, thank God. Don't feel obligated, We have the 7 principles to live by. But we will not torture you if you don't follow them. You know what I'm saying? So we all have our personal beliefs, whether they are conscious or not. If we hope to grow in wisdom and understanding, up there, wisdom, truth, and meaning, we should examine our beliefs. Where do they come from? That would make a good meditation. And I'll just leave you with this. I respect faith. This is another little quote. I respect faith, but doubt is what gives you an education.
Thank you so much, Steve. I need to see where we are. I was listening too closely. All right. Our closing music is This Is My Song.
Number 159.
Thank you.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and vine. But other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Now hear my song, the God of all the nations, a song of peace for them and for mine. We extinguish this flame,
But not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
your way.